and we also go live on YouTube. So here we are. We wait a couple of minutes so that various attendees can join in. In the meantime, I would like to welcome all our amazing speakers that are dedicating their evening to us. Wait a couple of seconds more. All right. So here we go. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure for us to have you here to talk about a very, very important topic this evening, which is international cooperation, specifically geared towards research and innovation. And you know, we live in a time where research and innovation is absolutely pivotal, especially now that the pandemic has shown how much we need to get together in order to fight this kind of diseases. And in general, research and innovation in international cooperation, the more the merrier. That is the lining. Today we have the pleasure to create this debate, which is made possible by EU40, the network of young MEPs, together with the College of Europe. I would like to thank them very much for being part of the organization, and MEP member of the European Parliament, Ivo Christoph, who I would like to thank specifically for being our host tonight and for bringing the point of view of the European Parliament. Before joining into the debate, I would like to present to you our fantastic moderator this evening. It's my pleasure to have here with us Martina De Sole. She is the head of cooperation at APRE, which is the Agency for Promotion of European Research. And she's also the Horizon 2020 National Contact Point, which is something that really is interesting because she will be able to guide us tonight and dive into specifics of research and innovation. Having said that, I have spoken even too much, so I will leave it up to Martina to guide the conversation. And I thank all of you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alessandro, and thank you, Mr. Christoph, for the invitation for today, for this important debate around EU-China research and innovation relations. So China is one of the EU's biggest trade partners, with an average of 1 billion of trade out every day. So the importance of China as a key partner has been confirmed multiple times by the highest representative of the European Union, and also latest it has been said that the EU expects its relationship with China to be one reciprocal benefit in both political and economic terms. But this is particularly true when it comes to research and innovation, that we consider really a crucial driver for economic and social development, especially in this pandemic moment. So just to set a little scene, the EU-China cooperation is governed by a science and technology agreement signed in December 1998 and renewed 3 times, so the last time in December 2014. This brought to an important step forward in the dialogue, and in 2016 it has been instituted the so-called co-funding mechanism, a joint initiative launched by the EU and the Chinese government to support joint research and innovation under the Horizon 2020 framework. In parallel, also the European Research Council signed an implementing arrangement with China that we are going to discuss later with the President Bourguignon. So we are now in a peculiar time where the impact of the pandemic requested an acceleration regarding the discussion on tax sovereignty and the need to find a balance between the European autonomy on the value chain, on products, on sourcing, on raw materials, and the openness of the Future Horizon Europe program. So we need to move towards a strategic opening. So all the elements of successful cooperation in the research and innovation with China are present, and we are going now to discuss what can be the way forward in light of the new program Horizon Europe, but not only, and which are still the challenges, the obstacles that could be there. And so we have here today really distinguished panelists to tackle these discussions. So without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Hiro Christoph, member of the European Parliament and member of the STOA as well. Your remarks.
Thank you, Martina. Dear colleagues, honorable guests, it's a honor for me to be the host of today's discussion. First, let me thank EU40 and the College of Europe for the initiative to organize such an important and timely debate. I believe it's the right political momentum to put the spotlight on the future relation between the EU and China, especially when it comes to the cooperation in the field of research and innovation. We are in the middle of a pandemic, which requires an international coordinated response. In that sense, a new context-based approach is needed, which takes into account the new reality. This new reality consists of many structural changes, geopolitical, ecological, and technological, to name a few. When we talk about our future cooperation, it's important to point out that we have a shared responsibility in tackling the spread of the virus. In this respect, we need to step up efforts in boosting research on treatment and vaccine in order to overcome the global health crisis as soon as possible. From this standpoint, I think the health sector should be at the heart of our strategic cooperation. In the same vein, another global challenge we must tackle together is the climate change. Winning the fight against global warming will be possible only if we unite our efforts. Last week, the European Parliament voted in favor of the EU-China agreement on geographical indications. I believe this is a step in the right direction because it will improve the visibility and access for high-quality European agricultural products while strengthening our economic ties. The COVID-19 outbreak has also revealed the critical importance of technological advancement. There is a huge debate going on in the European Parliament on the question of the future legislation of technology based on artificial intelligence. There is a common understanding that the development of new digital technology must go hand in hand with strong ethical principles and data protection. In this respect, I believe we need a set of clear rules, not only in Europe, but also at international level. Finally, I would like to point out the necessity to step up efforts in building a balanced EU-China cooperation in the area of science and innovation based on reciprocity and a level playing field. Let me thank all the panelists for being here with us today, and I'm looking forward for an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christoph, also for highlighting which are the main thematics that should be tackled in this EU-China cooperation. So before starting, I just would like to introduce you to our panelists. We will start with Professor Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, the President of the European Research Council, Davide Cucino, the President Emeritus and Brussels Representative representative of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China. We will have then Professor Müller, Senior Professor at Technical University of Dresden and coordinator of a STAR project of Horizon 2020 Trans-Urban EU-China. And last but not least, David Harmon, the EU Public Affairs Director of Huawei. So to start, I would like to call on the virtual floor Professor Bourguignon, that is the President of the European Research Council. We know that European Research Council supports frontier research, cross-disciplinary proposals and pioneering ideas in all areas of science, including also social science and humanities, in all new emerging fields, and also introduce unconventional and innovative approaches. The approach is actually high risk, high gain. The grants are awarded directly to the researcher and is portable, so researchers can choose where to conduct his and her project. And this had a very good effect also in creating a market among different universities. ERC grants are based on the sole selection criterion of excellence. So as the rest of Horizon 2020, the ERC is open to the world, meaning that researchers from everywhere in the world can apply. This is valid also for Chinese researchers, of course, but with China, like with other 12 other countries, the ERC in 2015 has also signed an implementing arrangement with the aim to facilitate research collaboration by hosting Chinese research who are holders of the NSFC grants in ERC-funded teams, like temporary visits. So according to the latest data, we have 51 Chinese nationals holding an ERC grant, and 38 Chinese scholars have been on research visits in ERC teams. So, Professor Bourguignon, considering your remarkable experience not only as ERC president and as a scientist, but also in your experience with China, long-standing experience, how do you see the evolution of the EU-China relations, also in the framework of the future and upcoming Horizon Europe? You are muted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about this important topic. Indeed, I think maybe I'll start with the fact that my relation to China has a long story, because my first visit to China goes back to 1981. I'm a mathematician, and I was invited there to spend a month, and actually a month-long conference. Actually, it was the first one in the second one in mathematics after the Cultural Revolution. So you can imagine the change is quite dramatic. And then even from this point of view, before I come really to the European Research Council proper, just to remind the change of the situation. And the change has been really the result by a decision and a very steady attitude of the Chinese government to finance research. In the year 2000, the share of the total research expenditure by China was only 5% of the world expenditure. In 2017, it was 24%. So you see the change. But also this is reflected in the production by Chinese scientists, which is also has grown fantastically. The world in the world scientific publications, the weight of publication by Chinese scientists was not even 6% in 2000. Now it's 21% in 2018. And of course, when you talk about science, you also have to talk about quality. So what about what we consider the most visible and most important publication? If you look at the 1% highly cited articles, which is the one recognized by the communities as most important, it was 2% in 2000. Now it's 17.5% in 2018. So you see the progress of Chinese research has been very spectacular, and of course, completely coordinated with the massive investment by the Chinese government, with the result that the overall investment of China passed over the overall investment in Europe 2 years ago. It's supposed to overpass the American and the US investment very soon, 2 years from now. And it could even, as you know, in Europe at the moment, there is more or less a stagnation of investment in research. And it could actually be twice as big as the investment in Europe by 2026 or 25. So this is the context. And in this context, of course, I mean, for the European Research Council to develop a relation with the agency in China, which is really the most active one, which is the National Natural Sciences Foundation, the Chinese NSF, as one tends to call it, was a very natural step. And it was taken in 2015. And I was very pleased that we could get this agreement very quickly. And of course, it's a very simple agreement, and which really allows Chinese visitors to visit ERC, the teams of ERC grantees anywhere in Europe. And so far, I must say, you gave the figures, and the figures are a bit disappointing in a sense. And actually, we really hope there would be more Chinese visitors, because if you compare the visits by Chinese scientists to Europe or to European laboratories, it's much, much smaller than the ones in the US. So if the overall picture of the relations in the science of Europe and China is not comparable to the relation between US and China. So now the perspective is that, of course, we try to enhance this, and which I'm actually discussing closely with the Chinese NSF ways of enhancing these visits, because I think they are not up to the level of the quality on both sides, because as I stressed, China has not only put money, but it has also improved its quality very remarkably. And so I hope this will be the perspective. The other point I want to make, which is a more general point, but I think it's very pertinent in relation with the present situation, which is the fact that, of course, in science, there is competition, of course, but you see, it's so important to have also collaboration. And the way the scientists collaborate and compete is quite different from economic competition, because most of the time it's done on a very personal basis. It means that you develop very personal relations, which you need decades to build strongly. Myself, I was teaching at École Polytechnique, and I was often the mentor of Chinese students. And so, of course, I knew them personally, and I've still kept good contacts with them. But also, this is not only the point, I mean, the point that there is a longer term, but also that science is a completely international good. And if you really want to have science at the highest level, you cannot consider it at national level. And therefore, being open to the world for ERC is not just a motto, it's a necessity. And that's something which Commissioner Moedas defended very much. He had 3 O's, and one of the O was open to the world. And this was actually in my office in Brussels when I was the president. Now I'm only doing an interim. This was really what was on top of the world map in my office, ERC open to the world. So I think we are very, at the ERC, we are very committed to hosting visitors from all countries who are also completely open to having scientists really who really can come and work and receive ERC grants, provided they spend enough time in Europe. And my last point is a move which has been made by the Scientific Council 2 years ago, which is for our synergy grants, which are the grants which are not given to individual researchers, but groups of 2, 3, or 4 researchers. We open the possibility that one of the 2, 3, or 4 could be outside Europe. And I think we were very pleased to see that about 20% of applications were with one researcher outside Europe. And this year we gave 34 such grants. And actually, I was very pleased. The first year, last year was the first year, the only country which was benefiting from this was the US. This time, really, it's much broader, and there are 5 grants going outside the US to Australia, but also 1 to Japan, and 2 to Canada, and 1 to Chile. So it shows that, and this without counterpart from the country from where the researcher is located, only on the basis that the synergy between the researchers is decisive to make the project successful. So I hope we can develop further such instruments, and for us, this is one of the elements we want to monitor closely in the years to come in the context of Horizon Europe, which is the next framework program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bourguignon. My second question, you have replied already to my second question in a way that it was actually, now we start seeing also frontier research as really an important asset to guard tech sovereignty. But your point that was also recorded by in the Q&As by the participants, it is that we really need to consider cooperation versus competition, and that science should really keep on being open to the world. So thank you very much for this. And talking about the competition, we have with us Davide Cucino. As I said before, he is the President Emeritus of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China, that in the last 20 years has been supporting European companies to access the Chinese market to level the playing field. So I would like to ask you, now we are dealing, we started with basic research, we are going towards actually innovation in a way. So can you please introduce the work of the Chamber, and also how do you see the opportunities evolving in the past years for European companies in China? You're muted.
Yes. I just noticed. Thank you very much, Martina, and thank you, the colleagues and the participants to the panel, because it is a very challenging topic that we are discussing today. And I was very fascinated to hear Professor Bourguignon talking about the achievement that the academy has reached vis-a-vis the challenges that research and development offer to the specific segment. Talking about companies, talking about industries, probably the situation is a little bit different. I will go back to this point in a while. Only I would like maybe to stress the fact that the European Chamber is not a service provider organization, but it is an organization that, as you have very well said, Martina, a few moments ago, has 20 years of history, this year in 2020, and has taken shape in year 2000 at the eve of the entry of China into the WTO. The reason why the chamber was created was to try to be of help, of support to the negotiator when the negotiator were discussing the entry of China into WTO. Since then, I think that the work of the chamber has evolved. We are organized into three main streamlines. The first one is the advocacy. We try to work on the interest of our members, which are, by the way, this year more than 1,700, in terms of discussing with the governments and with the European Union, with Chinese government and with the European Union policies that could benefit European companies when they try to enter and to invest into the Chinese market. The second pillar is the business intelligence. We try, by means of the advocacy work, to offer to our members a platform of information in order to let them set up in the best way in the Chinese market. And the third one, we create the community. So it is an ABC model. And we created the community, putting together different interests toward a main goal. I was listening a few moments ago about the word competition. Yes, this is a word of competition, and Thanks God that there's competition, because competition, if it is carried out at the level playing field, brings innovation. Market forces, when they are open and free to innovate, generally they bring a lot of benefits to the society. You have also mentioned the fact that the European Commission is paying, and the Council are paying very much attention to the relationship with China. You know that there is this dichotomy. China has been regarded as a systemic competitor as well as strategic partner. I think that at the moment there is not a balance between the two terms, and but our task is to try to move from a systemic competitor to a strategic partner as a whole. In the main services and work that the chamber does in its daily operation, there are a few publications that are regarded both by the Chinese authorities and by the European Commission and the European Parliament as a flagship publication. One of those is the position paper. We have published the new edition in September of 2020, so it is a quite new edition. And beside an executive summary, it includes the key recommendation toward Chinese authorities and toward the European Union, divided by sectors, and also horizontally as far as some of the topics of interest are concerned. We have a working group on research and development, a working group that has evolved. It started as a forum where the members were exchanging the best practices, and it has evolved into a working group where we discuss also the hurdles that we find in working in China in the context of the research and development. And in the position paper of this year, of course, there have been a number of key recommendations, but what it is very interesting in is that the first two key recommendations among the 5 that we have highlighted, one is mainly encouraging foreign investor enterprise in contributing in research and development in China, but asking for an optimization of the context where those companies have to carry out activities. And specifically, we have focused on the need of work on sustainability topic, which is, you have maybe have read some of the highlights of the communique of the party congress that has been held 2 weeks ago, is one of the main target of the new 5-year plan. And by definition is only the start of a path by Chinese government toward a carbon neutrality that have to be happen according to the plan by 2060, which is at least trying to align with the target that the European Commission has to get a climate neutrality by 2050. And the second big topic that is subject of one of our recommendation is to try to work more aligned with China in the science technology segment. And you have seen from the communique that for the first time, the 5-year plan has as a core science, technology, innovation as the main, let's say, instrument in order to reach a society which will become very well balanced. I would stop here for the moment, and I'm very happy to elaborate on science and technology issues and challenges that we may face in my second intervention. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I will follow up immediately with another question regarding, actually, we know that there is a huge volume of investment in China and consequent contribution in innovation from European companies. But the problem is that the context of open access to R&D projects and funds is not always so open. So can you briefly comment on this?
Okay. So in this case, you know that there is a very big attention at the moment in China toward investments, and all the instruments, all the improvement in investment instrument in having foreign entities being present in China is targeting investment. So there have been a lot of measures. You know that there are these special economic zones that are attracting with more favorable measure the investment of foreign companies. We feel that this is not the case when we talk about research and technology and innovation. Why? Because there are a number of hurdles of many of different hurdles. They are from the very simple, which are, for example, that the calls for research and innovation in a number of segments are not open, and are those where the Chinese industry still have to reach a cutting edge. You have problems on the calls for proposals that have a very short deadline, and they are presented only in Chinese language, cutting the challenges and the opportunities for a number of companies. If we talk about multinationals that are very eager to work on research and development project that brings also money for research and development, they hire Chinese local for research and development. Again, there is another issue, and the issue is that to access to a number of programs, you need to obtain a status, which is called high and new technology enterprise status. And this status implies that the property, the intellectual property of some of the products that you are implementing for a specific program in China needs to be registered in China. So there are a lot of multinationals with a lot of patents that are coming from abroad that are not able to obtain this status. And also when you obtain this status, at this stage, there are some other hurdles that come up. There is also a positive aspect in this opening of the research and development sector. In 2019, the Ministry for Science and Technology has encouraged research and development institutions in China to involve more international entities and international actors. There have been policies, as I was mentioning before, specific for the special economic zone, and that's where we come as European Chamber. They should not be only specifically limited to the special economic zone. This should be a policy, and this should be measure that should be carried out in the whole country. And I think before has been also mentioned the best practice of the EU-China co-funding mechanism. Here we are very much interested again in carry out a kind of same collaboration for the upcoming Horizon Europe projects, but we need, and I concur what was Ivo was saying a few moments ago, we need reciprocity. I think that the R&D environment in Europe is resiliently open. and the numbers that have been expressed by Professor Bourguignon are quite self-explanatory. We need the same and concrete degree of openness also in China. And for this, we are trying to engage a number of stakeholders in China, especially the Ministry of Science and Technology that hold one of the biggest, let's say, basket of projects to distribute, but also the Ministry of Information and Industry Technology, with all, and probably David will enlighten us later, with all the problems that, of course, originate from this, because there are some sensitive and critical sectors that need probably to find, again, a better balance between the interest of different companies of the different blocks. Yeah. But again, beside the negative aspect and the problems that we encounter on a daily basis, it is not only, you know, this is not black and white or white. There are areas in which we see encouragement, and we try to work on this specific path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davide. I just would like to go briefly back to Professor Bourguignon, because as we were talking about openness, and we know that the second O of the Moedas Commission was open science, and as you were pointing out, really cooperation among researchers should really be quite open. How do you see this openness happening in these relations, and if you think that this can be improved? Just a brief reply on this, if you can. And still, you are muted still, sorry.
So I think, again, I'm positioning myself as a scientist. So, you know, for scientists, the main products are actually research articles. And actually, if you look at the research articles which are co-signed by EU researchers and Chinese researchers, again, there are less of those than co-signed by US and Chinese researchers. So I think from that point of view, I must say, I don't see so much of that, in particular in some areas where now China has moved forward very, very successfully. I'm talking about, in particular, about genomics or areas of this kind. For example, at the moment, the laboratory with the largest number of publications, and they are really open publication, is the Beijing laboratory on genomics. So I think at the level of the publications, I don't think there is really an issue. Of course, the issue is when you move from research articles to patent filing or things like this, then of course the situation becomes quite different, and then we get closer to what we just heard, and of course that's a different issue. But in the case of the European Research Council, as you know, we have a program called Proof of Concept, which accompanies the researchers who want to get closer to the market or closer to societal needs. And of course, that would be something which could become more complicated. But for the moment, I think we have not seen, in terms of, I mean, access to publications, really something which would be problematic as a systematic problem. I'm sure some people will find some counterexamples to what I said, but I'm really talking about the general flow and the general attitude. And I must say, as you know, I'm a mathematician. In the case of mathematics, this is really a completely open field, and actually publications worldwide are really completely accessible. I know in some other disciplines, it's another issue because you can get closer to a product in engineering or other fields. But altogether, I don't see this as a major issue from the scientific point of view.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Bourguignon. And talking about other good examples of cooperation, I would like to invite to the virtual floor Professor Bernhard Müller as coordinator of Trans-Urban China. That is really a very successful project in the cooperation between Europe and China. Is about to end in June 2021. And the project had the ambitious objective to help policymakers, urban authorities, real estate developers, public service providers, and also citizens in China to create socially integrative cities in an environmental friendly and financial viable way. So can you please share, I think at this point you will have many, the lessons learned by the project?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Martina, for the introduction, and welcome to everyone as well. I'm very happy to be able to share some experience with you tonight. Well, actually, I would put the experiences in three major lessons. One would be never underestimate the challenges of complex research projects with China. A second one would be develop trust and mutual understanding. I will elaborate a little bit on it. And the third one would be as well, especially regarding social science, make yourself familiar with the data gathering conditions. And maybe there would be a fourth one as well, which I would just don't see it as a criticism, but with regard to our project partners in China, I would never organize an online session on cooperation between Europe and China at 6 o'clock in Europe and 1 o'clock at night in China, because the Chinese colleagues do not have many possibilities to follow. But this is, please don't see it as a criticism. It was just a side remark. Well, regarding our project, we have a very complex topic already with urban issues. Every citizen, every urbanite feels to be an expert on that, and is in a certain way an expert. To talk about urban sustainability is already a complex topic. Now we have 14 partners from Europe, 8 from Europe, 6 from China. From China, there are excellent research partners, but as well, there are high-level policymaking institutions like China Academy of Urban Planning and Design as a co-lead for the project, which is directly linked to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So not an easy situation. We have multidisciplinarity in the project. Of course, there are multiple interests as well involved in the different, let's say, hierarchies in the different parts of the world and so on. We have an association, Eurocities Association of cities in Europe, and a similar organization in China. So it's really applied research and in a way, or application-oriented research, what we do, with some basic research components. But what is very important here is the multicultural approach. So we see, of course, and within European research projects, we see this already as a challenge. But with China, it's even a little bit more difficult. I'm not talking about the language as such, but the language in the context of cultural understanding, cultural behavior, and so on, as well terminology. So when the Chinese partners talk about ecological civilization, they mean sustainability. If they talk about sharing and engagement, they talk about participation. So one has to learn what the other side means. we have to see that in especially urban issues, social issues are very much determined as well by the institutional setup. So we have the single party system in China with administration, with the party structure on all levels of government. We have very interesting, very active street committees and even neighborhood committees, residence committees, which are very important for the development and the cooperation on a neighborhood level. So on the locust level of the, let's say, social public working together. And then, of course, when we talk about scales, when we talk about urban development, a city in China, the biggest city in China, one of the biggest, or if it's not the biggest city in the world at the moment, is Chongqing. Not too many people have heard about it, maybe. It has 82,000 square kilometers, which is about the size of Austria, and in one city. And it has about 30+ million inhabitants, maybe a little bit bigger than Tokyo. This means 3.5 times Austria. So if we talk about a city like that, and there are other cities not of that size, but big enough, then we talk about something totally different, as if we talk about Brussels, Rome, Berlin, even the bigger cities in Germany, not to talk about my own city with 500,000 inhabitants. So this understanding, the scales are different. Then the urban-rural divide is different in China, with different legal systems, the status of the people, migration topics, and so on, the speed of development, the changes which require constant learning, as well as pilot projects. What means a pilot project in a Chinese understanding is something that you involve multi-million people, and then if you see that it works, you put it, let's say, upscale it to the whole country. So this means that we have to understand these kind of differences very well to be able to, in a way, not to go into wrong directions. This means we have to have very close cooperation with the Chinese colleagues, and the best is to have Chinese colleagues in our own teams in the European working institutions. But, and this brings me to my second point, trust and understanding. I think cooperation may happen officially between institutions, but what Professor Bourguignon was mentioning already, it's finally people who conduct the research. And this plays a big role. So personal meetings are extremely important, especially in the beginning of a project. We have to count with misunderstandings. We have to live with them as well. We have to try to clarify things, which means we have to spend a lot of time together. One example, we talked about gentrification. So in Europe, gentrification means say moving out of the poorer population in an urban renewal area, which is then attracting the more modern, the more well-off people. This in China, in some scientific articles, is discussed as a strategy. We see it as a problem. There it is seen as a strategy. So we have to understand that and to get to not only wording, but to new concepts. And this makes this cooperation so interesting. So we also have to accept that in the Chinese culture, arguing in a public environment is not very popular. So we have to find other ways how to clarify these kind of misunderstandings. And fortunately enough, we were rather well off in doing that. But frequent meetings, and even now online every month and so on, regular meetings, then irregular meetings, besides that, are very important. And my third point regarding the lessons is the data gathering, for instance. Sometimes I see that there is a lot of discussion about how data are shared. I think this is not the main issue. In technical disciplines, yes. In regard to social science, maybe it's a bit different. So take, for instance, spontaneous interviews, which we like to do, or systematic interviews at neighborhood level. Of course, in Europe, we would clarify the ethic questions. In China, you have to get all kinds of permits for that. You have to send questions beforehand, and then you see whether you can go on or not. Then, of course, you have to do everything together, not only because of the language, but because of trust. Then in the data gathering process and so on. And fortunately enough, when you elaborate such a project and you step in, make sure that you have critical minds on your side, on the Chinese of the Chinese partners, who have as well critical questions, who are on a similar line, who know as well the European environment, and then you have a good possibility to get out with some results, which you can really promote. So in this case, I think we were lucky enough through some good preparation, some long-term cooperation. Professor Bourguignon has mentioned that already as well, which is let's say, a key to success in such a cooperation.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I would like now, it was really very, very interesting to focus also on the challenges and opportunities, and especially on the cultural shock that it can start working with every third country, actually every strategic partner, and so how we can actually overcoming working together and knowing each other. So thank you very much for this, also for the finding for the projects. So I would like to move to David Harmon, that is the EU Public Affairs Director of Huawei, for talking about a different kind of issues. So besides being a leader in enabling technologies and infrastructure globally, I was really impressed when I read the number of researchers worldwide from Huawei that are 96,000. Huawei has also 24 research centers in Europe with 1,800 employees and more than 200 collaborations with more than 180 European universities. What was also interesting from my point of view, it was that Huawei is actually participating in 25 Horizon 2020 projects. We also see an incredible rise in Huawei in the field of standards in wireless communication and in the number of patents. And this is also testifying a clear investment in Europe from the company. So can you please comment about this and how you see this cooperation with Europe?
Martina and Alessandro, thanks indeed for hosting the event today. And at the outset, I'd like to thank MEP Ivo Ristov for hosting the broader event. I myself used to work in the European Parliament. I finished in the European Parliament in 2010. I worked in the Liberal group of the European Parliament on the Secretariat. And I was a member of the Cabinet of the European Commissioner for Research, Innovation and Science between 2010 and 2014. So I do understand at close circle the very important role that the European Parliament plays in enacting the new rules and regulations for Horizon Europe. And this process of conciliation between the European Parliament, the European Commission and the Council is now ongoing. And I just wish the MEPs and every success in bringing ensuring final agreement to the terms and rules of Horizon Europe for the next few years, 2021 to 2027. I also remember with great fondness the great work, Jean-Pierre, of the European Research Council and it is wonderful that that program is so open. In fact, openness does underpin the operation of Horizon 2020, and that is the default position for Horizon Europe as well. And the reality is that's the right approach to take. If one wants to, if broader society wants to deliver innovative products and solutions into the marketplace, one has to cooperate in an international context where that best technical and educational expertise exists. Participation from the research, educational, private and public communities are there under Horizon 2020 from as many as 180 plus countries around the world. Huawei as a company does support open innovation. Huawei as a company does support open science. Huawei as a company does support open collaborative activity. And that actually underpins our broader business strategy. And Huawei is very much a European company. We set up our first research center in Sweden in the year 2000. Huawei is embedded very much so within the EU ICT research ecosystem. And one should ask ourselves the question, why is that the case? Because Europeans by nature are very strong software developers. And that is why Huawei has 23 research centers operating in 12 countries across Europe. I was very interested in the comments that were made by both David and by Bernard when David said the issues connected, or David said the issues connected between EU and China that relate to research and science are not black and white. And Bernard said one has to also look at the cultural issues attached in building that relationship. When I finished in the European Commission in November 2014, I actually went to China and I worked in China for 5 years until the autumn of last year. So I saw firsthand the educational and intellectual rise is the word in China. I mean, basically, there's a commitment in China to invest 2.5% GDP in research and development. So the educational intellectual capacities of China are very strong. Not necessarily in all areas, but are very strong in a number of areas. And when one looks at the EU-China relationship in a broader context, there are framework agreements in place under the EU Science and Technology Cooperation Agreements. There's the EU-China Innovation Dialogue that has been up and running since 2012. In fact, there's going to be shortly an EU-China ICT dialogue that will take place later this month. There are practical initiatives to support broader collaboration between European researchers and scientists and Chinese researchers and scientists, such as through the Euro Access program. Well, that's a broader program, through the Enrich program, which is a specific EU-China initiative. And of course, through programs that David has mentioned already that are operating in China through the Ministry of Science and Technology, mainly the new EU-China mechanism for research and innovation. Moving forward, the European Union has set out its political agenda for the next 5 years in support and in collaboration with the European Parliament and the EU governments. When one looks at the different policy areas where the EU is seeking to develop, the technology sector underpins all these key policy arrangements. In fact, if one looks at the implementation of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, these goals can and will only be implemented through the process of technological innovation. And even when one looks at the areas where the EU and China are cooperating, whether it's in the field of agriculture and food, whether in the field of aviation and transport, whether in the field of smart cities and urbanization, the ICT sector underpins the developments of all these key policies and all these key vertical industries. In other words, the point I'm seeking to state is that it's very hard to decompartmentalize technology sector by sector, because as a global community, we're living through the beginnings of what is a broader digital transformation. And this is something that is new for the world. It wasn't there under 4G, but it is there under 5G as new products, new applications come into the marketplace. So, I mean, there are issues there connected to 5G security. As a company, Huawei believes 5G security can be managed. We believe that the EU and the broader international community has to develop common standards, common verification initiatives, common certification standards, so that broader society can benefit from new products that come on stream. As a company, as a privately owned company, incidentally, Huawei believes that we can support the implementation of the policy agenda of the EU institutions over the next 6 years. As I said, in that context, and it has been referenced already, Huawei as a company does support reciprocal market access for EU companies in China. As a company, we would support a new EU-China trade and investment agreement, although that is clearly taking some time. But a key point I would reinforce is that research and science is now not just a side policy that's carried out in the scientific laboratory. Research and science are now hardcore economic instruments. So when one looks at studies that have been carried out by the European Commission itself, or the OECD, or the World Bank, or the International Monetary Fund, World Economic Forum, one can see that both countries and companies that invest heavily in research and science can deliver stronger economic returns. And in fact, the European Commission, through DG RTD, the Research Director of the European Commission, and together with the EU Joint Research Centre, every year carries out what is one of the most acclaimed global reports in the field of research and development activity, known as the annual European Commission R&D Industrial Scoreboard. And Huawei as a company ranks 5th in the world in terms of levels of private sector investment in research activity. That European Commission survey covers over 2,000 companies in the world, all of whom are investing a minimum level of 30 million euro in research and development. I would also say that competition is good. Competition generates stronger, innovative activity. With regard to the EU-China relationship, yes, there's an awful lot of trade being carried out by both partners. €1 billion a day on the EU side into China, and Europe as a trading destination is the largest trading home for China. So they're the general principles that I wanted to just reference in reply to our first, in reply to the first question you just asked, Martin.
Thank you very much, David. Actually, we are already a little bit late with time, so I really would like to thank you for your remarks. But as we have some questions from the audience that in most part have been already replied during the speech of all of the panelists. But there is one for Mr. Christoph, actually. So there is someone who is asking if is the European Parliament happy about the budget of Horizon Europe? Is it enough from your point of view? So I would kindly ask you a short answer on this, and we also know that we obtain apparently these 4 billion more for Horizon Europe, but still next week will be crucial for identifying. So Mr. Christoph, Ivo, can you please shortly comment on this? I think you are muted as well.
So I would kindly ask you a short answer on this. And we also know that we obtain apparently these 4 billion more for Horizon Europe, but still next week will be crucial for identifying. So Mr. Christoph, Ivo, can you please shortly comment on this?
Yes, I'm hearing you on YouTube. That's why there is a short delay. Sorry so much. Yes, I heard the question. For making the long story short, the budget for Horizon is quite important. Of course, it could be more. Anybody expects more and more, but we have to find the most rational way to spend it. That's our goal. So we have quite a big package of money, but we still could improve a lot the way of spending this money.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ivo. So actually there is another question, and I think this is on gender aspects, because actually one of the participants is pointing out that this is a typical manel. So only we have if there is just a coincidence that most speakers are male, or if this is an indicator of EU-China cooperation and the gender imbalance. I have been working in projects with China, and I can say that I have had many Chinese female colleagues as well. So I didn't, in my personal experience, but if there is someone who would like to take up on this, Bernard, very, very quickly.
Sorry. Yes, of course. I think this is, I would share the same experience. In our project, for instance, we have a clear gender balance. So it's 50-50. And especially on the Chinese side, I think we have more female researchers and responsible persons than male ones. So I would fully support this kind of gender balance. Unfortunately, maybe, yeah, tonight we are not in balance, but I'm sure, Martina, you make up for all the men.
Thank you very much. So we are going towards the end of this very, very interesting hour that we spent together. I hope Alessandro will actually allow me to give the floor for a last statement, just a brief statement from all of the speakers, starting from Professor Bourguignon. Very shortly, your takeout from these discussions.
I think the discussion was very good because it showed the variety of ways in which Europe and China are already cooperating and what are the perspectives. So that was clearly shown. For me, I just repeat in one sentence what I said about in the case of research and in the case of research, how important it is to view collaboration and competition as so tightly interwoven that you cannot just dismiss any country in the world, because then you put yourself out of touch with the best possible research. And particularly with China, which clearly is a powerhouse in the area, and as a result of a very steady and positive attitude of investing over long term and really developing high-level research.
Thank you very much. Davide.
Here we are. There's a word that we didn't use tonight during this panel, which is decoupling. and unfortunately is a word that is very much used recently, not only to describe the situation on the economic segment between US and China, but it is a word that has very many implication with technology. And we have seen a risky trend to politicize this word that can put in danger and in risk also the technological decoupling. So I think that science and innovation, science and technology, and research and development should be probably an element to try to avoid that we jump into this risky context and to save the relationship that technology would offer in terms of relationship between blocks and countries.
Thank you very much, Davide. Bernard.
Yes, well, actually, I think we have seen there is a lot to share, to learn and to understand. And what we have not talked about is the Belt and Road Initiative, for instance. It has a huge impact on infrastructure in future, a huge impact on urban development. I think there's a lot to learn in terms of reciprocity between China and Europe. Well, if I would have to put it in one sentence, seeing all the challenges, as well the cultural challenges, which I mentioned, I think then we need more R&I cooperation with China instead of less. This brings me especially to the point regarding urban development, for instance. We are in a very favorable situation at the moment. China is preparing its next 14th five-year plan, and it's preparing a new urbanization policy, the continuation of the one from 2014 maybe. And in Europe, we have a similar situation with the Green Deal and the new Leipzig Charter, which is to be signed by the end of the month. So I think we have a favorable situation to continue cooperation and to further intensify it on urban development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So as a closing remark, I would ask David to close with your comment.
Martina, I would just say at the outset there that Huawei does, of course, have many women in very senior positions in our company, including Catherine Chen. In fact, is our overall boss, that she deals with government affairs, and she's an executive board member of Huawei. But it is still clear that governments in Europe and across the world have to do more to promote STEM education. Huawei as a company has been an active participant and an enabler of research activity in Europe, going back to FP7 through to Horizon 2020, and the company wants to engage strongly in Horizon Europe too. For Horizon Europe to be a success, there has to be broader collaboration between the research community and the industry community. So the principle of public-private partnerships are going to be enshrined as a key element of Horizon Europe. Mm-hmm. And Huawei as a company does believe that we can play a key role in implementing the policy objectives of the European Union, and in particular in implementing those objectives that are connected to a number of public-private arrangements that are going to deal with research activities in the field of smart networks and services and in key digital technologies. But moving forward, the collaborative research activity must also promote best practices in the field of the environment. We can't promote strong, sustainable, clean and green policies unless basic scientific activity is supporting the green agenda. Applied scientific activity is supporting the green agenda, because the net effect of that contribution and the net effect of that collaborative activity will be to ensure that environmentally friendly, clean and green products and solutions are then brought into the marketplace.
Thank you so much, David. And to close, I would like to ask our host, Ivo Christoph, if he can just close the meeting. And I would really like to thank all the panelists and Alessandro for the organization of this discussion. So Ivo, we will give you this 1 minute for the YouTube connection.
Close the meeting, and I would really like to thank all the panelists and Alessandro for the organization of this discussion. So Ivo, we will give you this 1 minute.
So I will be very short. I would like to thank once more you, the organizers, Alejandro, and our wonderful panelists for this very interesting and consistent discussion that we had, and I hope to have many more discussions of the kind in the future. Thank you once more.
Thank you very much. So, ad maiora, I think. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Martina and Alessandro. Thanks very much, MEP.
Thank you, everybody.